culture. Not like that. Like that. We talk about culture, a lot of times we talk about highbrow culture. So things like opera and ballet, or the sculpture of Rodin, or the paintings of Leonardo da Vinci. Maybe it's the literature, plays and sonnets of Shakespeare, or the poems and short stories of Edgar Allan Poe. The classics. Culture is often signified and transmitted through the arts, but it's more than just that. It includes the customs, beliefs, and laws of a group. The question that the cultural critic is interested in isn't so much what culture is, but what it does. And that is that culture transmits and perpetuates the values and ideologies of a group. So do you see a problem with that? Because the cultural critics do. That capital C culture is what we call the dominant culture. It belongs to people who look like me, white, Protestant, traditionally educated men. Age me 20 years and I could be the mascot for this culture. When we privilege this type of culture, we transmit the values and seek to keep the dominant culture dominant. Instead, the cultural critic is interested in what the dominant culture might consider the other, or marginalized groups. And these groups are often based on social class, religion, race and ethnicity, gender, and sexuality. When it comes to literature, the cultural critic is interested in the writing of those who belong to these marginalized groups, as well as how they're depicted in literature from the dominant culture. So when Springboard speaks of cultural criticism, this is what they're most interested in. Now, these are some of Springboard's ideas about the use of cultural criticism. So ethnicity, religious beliefs, sexual identity, and so on are crucial components of formulating interpretations of text. And this is true in literature from the dominant culture as well as from marginalized culture. An examination of the relationship between dominant and marginalized cultures is essential in all literature. When looking at a text through the perspective of marginalized people, new understandings emerged, especially if you don't belong to a marginalized group. Finally, cultural criticism is not the only means of exploring meaning in texts, nor is it exclusionary. There is feminist cultural criticism and Marxist cultural criticism. To wrap it up, the cultural critic explores the relationship between dominant and marginalized groups in literature. The cultural critic recognizes the value in art outside of the classics, whether it be poetry or fiction for marginalized groups, or pop culture. The cultural critic uses a critical lens that seeks to disrupt the hold of the traditional dominant culture on literature.